I've been asked to do sort of a short medicine walk or a walk where we look at plants and maybe look at some of the medicinal aspects that they have to offer, even some of the traditional and historical use of these plants, which is also important. Right here we're along the Grand River at our canoe launch here. And there's a number of species that grow here. This type of habitat is referred to as a riparian habitat. So the riparian zone is anywhere from the shoreline, the bank, back up to a certain point where we don't have any seasonal flooding. So right here we're in the riparian zone, and there's a number of species that are sort of adapted to this habitat. One of them that we have is right here. So in the Mohawk language, we refer to the river as Onze Kahiwaktaje. And what that means is there's willows growing along the bank. And so the willow trees are an important medicinal species for things like doing willow bark baths and making the willow bark tea for inflammation and things like that. So it's a really important species are the willow trees that grow here along the banks of the river. Another species that we have growing here, we have two actually. This is stinging nettle. So Urtica dioica is the Latin name. And so this is, it does sting you. It can create sort of a rash, these stinging hairs that occur here on the stems. It's not super painful for me. I'm used to the stings, and there's a certain actual medicinal aspect to the sting where it reduces pain and inflammation and swollen joints, and people with arthritis can actually sting themselves with the plant and get some relief from their arthritic pain. And this can also be gathered and made into a tea, and as a small plant in the spring can be gathered and used as a food. So this is really an important plant. This is the stinging nettle. And another close relative of the stinging nettle over here is the wood nettle. So the wood nettle is Laportea canadensis, and it's very common here along the rivers. Both these plants are very common along rivers and streams, and it's used in the same way as the stinging nettle, so very similar. Much bigger, broader leaves, actually has a lot more stinging hairs, sort of more of an aggressive version, but it's used in the same way. We also have the nettle growing here next to it. So they're close relatives, they grow side by side. One of the traditional uses of these plants, and this is noted in historical times, was these were gathered in the fall, and the stems were gathered, and the skin was peeled off the stems, the fibers were peeled off, and these were made into fish nets. So this is a very important plant that grows here in our riparian habitat. One more plant to look at before we leave this area. There's this plant with the yellow flowers here. It also has orange flowers. So in Mohawk, we refer to this plant as Okweza osida, and that means partridge feet or grouse feet because of the shape of the flower. It looks like a grouse's foot. And so this plant has a very juicy and almost a translucent stem. It's full of juices, and this is actually used to help to heal the rashes and stings from insects, from stinging nettle, from poison ivy. So that's what this plant is used for. So another really useful plant to have knowledge on. Look for the yellow flowers, the very translucent stems, and the sort of the oval leaves. They sort of have these small teeth on them. That's sort of what you want to look for. And so that grows commonly along the river as well. So this is pale jewelweed. We also have spotted jewelweed, which has orange flowers and is otherwise identical in appearance, other than having orange flowers and having some spots on the leaves. So that's jewelweed. So another good plant to sort of have a relationship and understanding of are this is giant ragweed. And so giant ragweed is actually the cause, it's one of the two species that cause seasonal allergies. And so I myself, I do get seasonal allergies from ragweed. And so one of the medicines that's very useful to me with mitigating my allergy symptoms is actually the stinging nettle again, which is growing here down at the base of it. And so just a simple tea steeped from the leaves gathered from this plant and the flowers gathered from this plant is very effective for me for treating my allergy symptoms. Just drink the tea, and after drinking the tea, a few cups of the tea, you'll start to feel a reduction in your symptoms. Be sure to drink a lot of water because the tea is sort of has this drying effect on your body as well. So when we're doing medicines, we're looking at plant medicines. It's always important that when you're learning to be asking people with a lot of knowledge and to be doing a lot of your research as much as possible. So if we're doing a medicine walk like this, I don't like to give too much detail on how to do or make things because there is always a danger of someone over using or misidentifying something. Stinging nettle is pretty easy because it does sting you. So that's one of the main, identifying features of stinging nettle is that it does cause the rash on you. And so it's pretty easy to identify. And so I don't have too much of an issue of giving sort of some medicinal knowledge and preparation for that plant. So when we're learning about plants and medicinal plants, or when we're wanting to engage with that knowledge, it's important for us to have a relationship with the land itself. And part of that is learning each plant and how to identify each plant, and also learning the different habitats that those plants exist in, and having a connection to that with our mind and our spirit. That's very important to our culture. And so in our culture of the Haudenosaunee, what we talk about a lot is how these things make our minds well. And that's the aspect of medicine, is just to see flowers blooming and seeing the different colors some people mention in their teachings is medicinal. So we feel the winds turn warm in the spring and we can look outside and we see all these flowers blooming. That's medicinal. It's a sort of an act of healing ourselves to go out and to engage with those flowers as they bloom and as they carry out their life cycle. And so that's really key and important for us to understand as we're learning about medicine plants, is to be able to engage with the land and set that base and that presence of just being out on the land and allowing yourself and your mind to connect and to let go of the things that are stressing us out in our lives, so that we can put all of our attention on what we're doing as we're standing outside, or if we're outside walking and gathering things and looking for medicines, things like that. We need to be fully engaged with the moment, fully engaged with what we're doing and intentional with what we're doing. And so just going out and practicing and showing our gratitude to these plants is an important part for me in learning about medicines and medicinal plants, is understanding that just to be in this place is a healing and a medicine in itself. And so to me, that's number one in learning about medicinal plants is just engaging with the land and finding your place and being present and seeing the butterflies and hearing the bumblebees and hearing the different bird songs and understanding those bird songs, because those are all also medicine. So in our culture, we also say that when the birds arrive in the spring, they bring their medicine with them, they bring their songs. And those songs, as they're singing, we hear it and it heals us, it heals our minds. And so that's another important aspect. This is their habitat. This is the habitat of many birds, is this grassland, is natural meadows. And so this is the place that we can engage with all of those aspects, all of those flowers and birds and butterflies, things that we see that bring good feelings into our body and into our minds. And so that's very important, I think, for learning medicine, is just to have that part of the knowledge, that part of the understanding of what these things are, because we can always look at plants as what do they have to offer us, but just being in the habitat is enough for a lot of our ailments, is to just to be out here and enjoying the outdoors. So we just came from a grassland meadow type habitat. Some of the two main ones that are important for what we do here at Guyana Say and as far as the habitat in Ontario is looking at grasslands. So the tall grass prairie is one, oak savannas are another habitat type, naturalized meadows are another important habitat where people historically and currently go to access medicine and different plants for various purposes. And the next aspect we're going to look at is the forest. Okay, so we're still in the riparian zone of the river. So this is sort of getting to the edge of the flood zone where it has the potential to flood, and we have a lot of black walnut trees. And so the next habitat we can look at is the forest type that exists here in southern Ontario and the Six Nations is the Carolinian forest. And so Six Nations, the community here, has the largest tract of Carolinian forest in Canada right now. So it's a very threatened forest. There's not much of it left intact. And it's one of the most biodiverse forests in Canada as well. And so the black walnuts that grow here are actually part of that habitat, part of the Carolinian forest habitat. They're an indicator species tree that were in that zone. And so the walnuts that come from the black walnut are actually edible. They were used historically and currently as a food source, not just by squirrels, but by humans. So you can gather them, you can process them and make your own flour and breads from these native walnuts, these black walnut. And it's practicing our ancestors' way of gathering food as well, and which is medicinal. All of these natural and native foods that our ancestors gathered were medicinal to their body, and we mentioned that in our culture, in our ceremonies, is these foods that we gather, these foods that we grow, are medicinal to us. They're not only to our minds, they make our minds well, but they also heal our body. And so these walnuts, they contain a lot of healthy fatty oils and protein and things that are very healthy for our body. And so our ancestors understood that aspect of nutrition as well. And so as we kind of move in here, what we're trying to accomplish here is a restoration meadow slash sort of riparian forest. So we have a lot of shade in this section. Right now we have a lot of the ragweed growing here, which is a native plant actually. And we have a lot of goldenrod growing here, which is also another native plant. And we have more of a meadow type habitat. It's really popular with the birds. In the spring we have tons of birds singing, and we have some nest habitat provided to them. And so this is a very place where we're trying to encourage healing of the land and healing of the ecology, and allowing some of the native plants to regenerate, and also physically planting some of these native plants back into this area. And so that's something I wanted just to mention briefly is our native habitats, the prairies and grasslands, the Carolinian forests. I mentioned the riparian habitat along the rivers. We also have wetlands and swamp habitat that are all really important to understand when we're learning medicine. Because if you want to access a specific medicine or plant, it's really important to understand the habitat and where those habitats might exist so you can access those medicines to incorporate into your lifestyle.